Hello to all fellow Stoics. Today, we'll explore how to use the philosophy of Stoicism to manage interactions with different types of people. We'll learn how to always say no in situations where it's necessary for our inner peace and well-being. Let's begin. Regardless of whether you set forth the energy to help somebody in the event that they come up short on want to change your work will be to no end. Epicus contended that our responses, not the actual occasions, shape our feelings. You've forever been there to help others, which is an uncommon quality nowadays anyway. It's fundamental to understand that. Regardless of how great your goals are, on the off chance that the individual isn't available to change, there will not be any. No matter what the help you offer before you, empty your energy into circumstances that might be unsolvable. Stay with us since this video will give direction on signs that recommend you may be attempting to open a locked entryway. We will talk about 9 kinds of individuals who, in light of multiple factors, don't really want to acknowledge help and frequently need to confront their difficulties alone. Make sure to buy into our feed so you don't pass up esteem capable substance. Before we start, check. Assuming you're bought in and assuming that you like what you see, make sure to raise a ruckus around town button and above all, leave your remark. So this video can contact more individuals. How about we start with the primary kind of individual you might not have any desire to assist first. Individuals who, with residing in quite a while at the core of human experience, there are those among us who wander into domains of lie building, substitute real factors for themselves. Such people stee in self-composed accounts grip to deception as truth, winding around a texture of misdirection to dress their lives a long way from an unemotional quest for mindfulness and inward straightforwardness. They pick to veil their frailties and fears with encouraging dreams. These creative manufactures go about as both a shelter and an enclosure, where the genuine situation is constantly reshaped to line up with their own expectations and impulses. The apathetic difficulty of confronting oneself with candor is neglected, exchanged for the charming simplicity of occupying a domain where badly designed verities are disregarded and just dreams find invite. It is a nuanced and risky 3-step dance with fact, where the stake is one's veritable self. Yet, what happens when the exteriors are stripped away and fact says, in its unmistakable structure, could these created fancies at any point persevere? Or are we definitely bound to defy the feelings of trepidation and evasions? We harbor contemplating over these ersat truths isn't just an issue of curiosity, yet a request to recognize and reconsider our own authenticities. It's a suggestion to look past the pretenses and find the boldness to have an existence that relates with the substantial world. Notwithstanding its defects, the sages of emotionlessness confer that we should wrestle with our blemish tion to develop the problem. With such spirits is that their underlying foundations in Pratin's stories are significant to the point that they nullify different perspectives. They disregard the way that our brains have the capacity to change our view of reality, seeing it through the crystal of our feelings, as opposed to its genuine indication as a rule. Their conduct stems not from malignance, but rather from an example of flabbergasting oneself. Such way of behaving may start from firmly established injuries or a profound craving for endorsement that slants their impression of presence. These difficulties might have provoked them to create a fantastical asylum for close-to-home endurance trying to help. These people represent an overwhelming errand as they have built vigorous mental hindrances. While you could endeavor to illuminate them with reality, they repel with thinking. That implodes under the examination of reality in spite of glaring proof. They control realities to adjust to their acknowledged fiction. Certified change is just conceivable, assuming they yield the blunders in their rationale, a cycle that regularly requires the guide of a carefully prepared mental expert. This mirrors the elements in present-day political talk, where individuals cling tightly to their principles, overlooking judicious blunders and despite irregularities continue in their conviction of being in the right. Furthermore, the go-getters by understanding others with a profundity that goes past the surface. We exemplify perhaps of mankind's most exemplary property. The Stoics, in their immortal insight, valued the craft of seeing the world from the perspective of sympathy, embracing others, sentiments with an open heart without any trace of predisposition. This preparation to get a handle on somebody's close-to-home setting is a temperance that lifts the soul, yet this very prudence can be confounded by some apparent as an opening for double-dealing. There are the people who, turning the idea of sympathy, find in one more's liberality, a weakness to be made the most of, unfolding, the pretense of companionship with self-centered thought processes. How then to recognize the real companion from the faked partner? The critical lies in the watchful perception of their activities. A dedicated companion looks for help in the midst of genuine need, showing a common trade of regard and care. Conversely, the exploiters uncover themselves through a predictable example of solicitations and favors, frequently for trifling circumstances, or those they could determine on their own. The recurrence and nature of their requests are obvious signs of their genuine thought processes. Consequently, as we cross with others, it is essential that sympathy doesn't visually impair us to the truth of their aims. We should couple the heart's liberality with the psyche's wariness, guaranteeing that our empathy isn't twisted yet coordinated towards the people who esteem and respond it in kind. People have a practically imaginative capacity to prompt culpability in others. At first, they could master your characteristics. Inquisitive might you, at some point, do this for me, seeing as you're an old buddy looking for help. Periodically is normal, yet these people routinely request help. Even in circumstances they could deal with freely, they don't see your experience as significant. It's an unstable circumstance, as you end up submitting to their requests, contrary to what you might think is best. They know how to affect you off base, for denying and, surprisingly, after innumerable salvages, they don't change, accepting there will continuously be somebody to rescue them. It is exhorted that you ponder, reducing most, if not all, connection with these people without thinking. Twice after the entirety of your own prosperity and obligations ought to be your preeminent concern. Thirdly, the narcissistic. There are those so submerged in themselves that they appear to accept the universe, rotates around them. Self-love is a confusing and frequently depleting attribute of human instinct. On life's way, it's unavoidable to experience those for whom the will be, the turnaround which all distinguishable reality circles. They abide in the hallucination that every occasion, each murmur of destiny resounds because of their presence. Picture this scene. You're sharing your dissatisfactions about the city's tumultuous traffic, and there stands the egotistical individual, decreasing your record with a kind of easygoing disdain, basically on the grounds that they weren't ends. Trapped in that grid-locked web, or while you're radiating with euphoria, sharing insight about a recently gotten work, a similar individual rapidly projects a pall over your great greetings, boning the stale way of their own vocation. This conduct can be compared to profound vampirism, where your energy and bliss are depleted to satisfy the unquenchable drain of their necessities and dramatizations in what ought to be a discourse. The discussion slants into a speech where just the conceited individual's sentiments and conclusions appear to issue. Confronted with this reality, one marvels, is it worth remaining by somebody so engaged in themselves and, surprisingly, more pivotal though? We have the inward solidarity to request that such an individual perceive and approve the sensations of others. It's indispensable to comprehend that regardless of the amount we focus on supporting somebody on the way of personal growth, assuming the individual being referred to is impervious to change, it's logical they will stay static in their propensities. Comparatively, assuming we are on a way of self-improvement and people around us soak us in pessimism, they can without a doubt turn into an obstacle to our advancement. In certain circumstances, shrewdness lies in knowing when to protect oneself and potentially distance from those whose presence no longer enhances close to home. Self-preservation. In this setting isn't a choice yet, a vital technique for mental endurance. Fourth, the people who don't recognize their imperfections. These people obligation regarding their activities, never apologize or concede. botches showing an absence of self-analysis and modesty, excellencies that logicians like the Stoics promote as vital for self-improvement. For them, the shortcoming generally lies somewhere else, never with themselves. They could credit a pessimistic result to misfortune. As opposed to searching for individual or outer deficiencies, they possess a reality where the impression of their own decisions appears to be far off and inaccessible, a reality where they are never the smiths of their own disaster. This point of view straightforwardly difficulties, indifferent lessons which stress the significance of self-analysis and lowliness as central points of support for self-improvement. The Stoics, with their persistent lucidity, instruct us that we ought to go up against our own weaknesses with similar equanimity, with which we acknowledge the impulses of nature as sinar. Exhorts, we don't see our indecencies as having a place with us similarly. We don't see diseases as a feature of our well-being thusly. When your brain revolutionaries recall that detestable is certainly not an outright malevolent, assuming that you keep it from being your lord. The individuals who sidestep liability regarding their deeds show a protection from reflection, a refusal to recognize that flawlessness is a characteristic piece of the human condition. The Stoics ask us to assume total ownership for our activities, and to comprehend that mistake, when perceived and pondered, is a strong educator. Despite disappointment, as opposed to searching for somebody to fault, emotionless way of thinking would advise us to inspect inner and outside causes with equivalent measure. Epicus, another extraordinary and different features. Not things upset us yet, our translation of their importance. And in this setting, the understanding is plainly one's very own disavowal, commitment to the issue while thinking about a system,